Welcome to another episode of Seven Laws podcast. My name is Michal Pura. I'm a commentator and analyst, and here with me is Professor Miroslav Barta, famous Egyptologist. Hi, Mirek.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to you, Mikhail.
Good morning to you as well. The first topic, our current topic, is maybe the biggest topic in the European Union right now. It's called Draghi report. What is it?
It's a report that became available on the 9th of September, shortly after Ursula von der Leyen was re-elected as a EU leader or leader of the Brussels bureaucrats. There are two parts of the report that is more than 4 pages long and can be downloaded from the official website of the European Commission. It consists of two essential parts. Part A, called a competitiveness strategy for Europe, the future of European competitiveness, and Part B, in-depth analysis and recommendations. Let me start with a brief quote that comes from the opening part of the report. I quote, "Europe is stuck in a static industrial structure with few new companies rising up to disrupt existing industries or develop new growth engines. In fact, there is no EU company with a market capitalization over 100 billion euros that has been set up from scratch in the last 50 years. Half a century. While all 6 US companies with a valuation above 1 trillion euros have been created in this period. This lack of dynamism is self-fulfilling." In other words, the report aims to address the principal pillars on which the EU is standing, which is an economy, Green Deal, sustainability, and this is as they write it in the opening part, this lack of dynamism,
Lack of everything, I would say.
complete lack of everything is self-fulfilling. And frankly speaking, in the last few days, I entertained myself with these reports, and one of the striking thing about the text, as I said, it's more than 400 pages of dense writing. There is not a single reference to capitalism or free market. And that's another self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's not so surprising because Mario Draghi, he's the former Italian prime minister, and he's also the former governor of European Central Bank, which is one of the most important institutions in the European Union. But he's a socialist.
He's
He's
socialist,
an
exactly.
Italian socialist, which is a very, very special case, I would say. So I wouldn't expect that he will talk or write something about the capitalism because capitalism is not what he loves.
Um,
Do you think so?
yes.
Yes, and
It's, it's a,
there are some pretty, I would say, strong criticism from the eastern and central part of Europe because he didn't ask even one prime minister or one Central European politician or Eastern European politicians about the current state of the European Union or about their ideas of the current state of the European Union or Eurozone. And so I would say it's not that good.
I would call it a inside job or home affair, because there is a several pages long list of institutions and individuals they ask for their opinion. There is a bunch of American scientists and political scientists, companies, institutions, think tanks, most of them obviously coming from Western Europe. And I think one of of the interesting features is that they really didn't bother to ask Central and Eastern European states or institutions of any kind, probably due to the fact that this guy, as many others, never experienced a what it means to live in a real socialistic country. So it's a, in my opinion, it's a sheer disrespect towards these countries. That's one thing. And second thing is there is a major mental contrast in the text, because on one side he says we must be more, capitalistic and free market, without mentioning them. And just a couple of pages later, he states the following: the EU suffers from a major gap compared to its trade partners in terms of the competitiveness of energy price levels, which vary very widely between member states, and price volatility is also a significant factor hampering energy-intensive industries and the entire economy. And this is the result. We completely lost our ability to compete with the rest of the world. Um, he just he just states, let me find the data.
I think
Um,
in 2002, which it was the year when there was another strategy confirmed by the European Union called the Lisbon strategy. And in this year, the economy of the United States and the economy of the European Union were almost equal. And the strategy was we must get ahead of the United States in, and I think it was 2010. It never happened. And I think it will never happen in the future. But I think this is almost the same.
Now the American economy in the gross production per capita is almost double compared
Yes.
to
So
European
we've
Union.
lost half.
And yeah, exactly. And if we look at the prices, electricity is almost two or three times higher in Europe compared to the US. Natural gas 4 or 5 times higher than in Europe. Uh,
And
so
electricity is almost two.
that's why it's a completely out of science fiction to imagine that there would be another Steve Jobs or Elon Musk in the EU in the near future or in the foreseeable future, which means 10, 15, 20 years. That's, I mean, there is a total lack of leadership, and I think there is this report that basically says now we know quite well what to do. But the point is that the measure of politicians and bureaucrats that led us to these economic results, to the prices of energy, etc., etc. So they led us into a blind alley, are now supposed to open a completely new
To
vision
solve
for the
everything. Yes.
European
Yes,
Union.
to solve the problems. Yeah. So
That's wrong. That's really wrong.
you don't have to read all 400 pages, but the conclusion is pretty depressing, I would say. I was depressed when I read it. And uh, the another part is the proposals to solve the problems. And I think this is the most maybe this is the worst part of the whole report, because the numbers, all the statistics, and the conclusions are right. Then we are in a pretty difficult situation, maybe the worst situation in a dozen years. And but the proposals are out of the reality for me, because as you already mentioned, the people who did this should solve the problems. And is there any case or example in the history this approach worked?
No, regulation is an absolute killer, and the problem is that the EU lacks common economic policy. We don't have a EU exchange, which means if you have a startup that is promising and needs a lot of money to start a real business, you can operate in one or another country within the EU. But if you need really a lot of money, there is no European source that would you go to, like European
It's a
exchange,
unified
and
capital market. Yeah.
ask for a billion of euros. Whereby in the States, it's such a huge area. You go to one exchange, and
You
if
have a
you are
one license.
and if you
You
are good enough, you have it, and here you go. And that's one of the things. And the second thing is that in when you read the annual Stanford's AI reports, you can clearly see the huge profound difference between the America and the money invested into the AI in Europe that is investing very little compared to America, actually compared to any other geopolitical region. And we tend to be rather obsessed with regulation, which is not wrong per se, because we can see it every day in the online media, how you can easily manipulate people and real information with fake news, etc. But still, where there is no development, there's only depredation, because civilization either, and we had this discussion over coffee before we
rise or
started,
fall.
civilizations either grow or depredate. There is nothing in between. There is no like stagnation forever. You have to grow in order to be able to address upcoming challenges, and these challenges are becoming bigger and bigger. So this is a major problem. And to conclude this part, to round it off, the Draghi says quite clearly that and that's what I'm saying, whereby prior to 2022, we were almost totally dependent in terms of gas and some other resources on Russia. Now we are completely dependent on China. And why? Because 75 to 90% of chips that are needed basically everywhere now come from China.
Yes. So you think that the non-growth society will not work? I think
The
so.
non-growth
No, it will not
society
work. It won't work.
won't
Yeah.
work. And I always um, give one example of Professor Kotetsky, who was a
And we are
famous,
already in a non-growth society in Europe, I would say.
yeah,
Not
and
everybody.
we are writing reports how to get better, but we are having the
Yeah.
same bureaucrats that are supposed to make of our future bright and working, which is uh, logical nonsense, I would say. And as I said, for me, the most terrible news coming from the report implicitly is that there is not a single reference to a free market. And I mean, we want to be like the Americans. We want to have everything they have, but it means exchange, free market, less of regulation, high-tech industries, etc., etc., etc. People from the big tech in Brussels, and they are only bureaucrats. That's I would say it's not a report about the current state of the EU. It's basically our destiny painted on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. So he proposes a huge amount of money or grants. Or I don't know how to say it. Uh, I think it's 800 billion euros per year uh, injected into European economy until every year until 2030.
But
But we don't have the money.
exactly,
That's the problem. And he's
local.
actually from Italy, as we already said. And Italy has a debt like 120 GDP percent of GDP.
The problem is that individual European countries are not exactly in the stage of economic growth. That's one
Yes.
thing. The second thing is that we have to deal with our um, um, state of armies, which are heavily um, under under sponsored, and so we need much more improvement in terms of individual armies in the EU, because still we have to completely rely on American support as long as it is there, because one day it can be very shortly after November the 4th, right? Is the and then we will all of a sudden we will be alone. And actually, the war on Ukraine against the Russians is still carrying on because of the massive support from the United States to Europe. We can see it in Germany. The Germans are not willing to support the Ukrainians anymore because they said that they have no economic, no financial reserves in the budget for this year.
German
And
Chancellor Olaf Scholz said yesterday that if he will be the prime minister, he will never send the long-range missiles to Ukraine, and that's the problem.
that's a huge problem. So this is how we see our military and political support to Ukraine, which can be in a long perspective a disaster for all and every single country in Europe. And let's not lie here, but the first countries will be the Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Czech Republic, and of course Estonia,
And Baltic
Lithuania, and
states, yeah.
Baltic states. So this is a huge problem. There is this mantra that we have to invest like 2% annually into our army, but don't forget that these 2% were suggested and basically accepted by all European countries several years before the Ukrainian
It was
war broke up.
I would say for the peace,
Now it should
for the
be
peacetime.
4%. Yes,
It was for the peacetime, actually.
and you know the public in most of the European states won't be willing to support such a policy, and it's the failure of leadership to convince the population that we are really on the verge of a global European conflict, because if the Russians prevail in Ukraine, they won't stop. And a couple of years later, as soon as they recover, as soon as they renew their military capacity, they will look over Ukraine in westwards.
Yes. There are, I would say there are two problems. You have this underinvested military capacity in the European Union, which should be your priority, or which is your priority now. And then you have the second priority, which is the decarbonization, or let's say Green Deal policy. The problem is that Green Deal policy is actually more expensive than the military capacity. So, what will you do for the first time? So it's a huge problem, and for me, the big issue is that the Green Deal policy is actually, uh, I would say, guilty, or all the Draghi report's conclusions are actually the results of the Green Deal policy. It,
That's an interesting remark.
yeah, because you've already mentioned the energy prices. Why they are so high? It's easy. It wasn't like that before.
Well,
It's because of the Green Deal policy. Let's say it clear.
we have to go back to the 1980s. At that time, a famous Soviet Union at the time, nuclear scientist Andrei Sakharov managed to smuggle out of the country, out of the Soviet Union at the time, a letter entitled "Nuclear Energy and the Freedom of the West," and thanks to our nuclear scientists living in Sweden at the time, it got published all over Western media. And in that letter, Sakharov makes the point that the KGB, the Secret Service of the Soviet Union, of today's Russia, developed a new strategy how to compromise economically Western world. I mean, Western European countries, namely, to compromise the nuclear energy, and in support of the gas imported from the Soviet Union that costed nothing, and that there developed our total dependence on the Soviet Union and later on Russia. That's why Americans were saying, leave the Nord Stream 1, don't invest into Nord Stream 2. Nobody listened. And primarily it was the Germany and all German chancellors that were saying, no, 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 we have to trade with the Russia as long as possible, because through the trade, we will keep them as a partner. And it lasted despite the conflict in Crimea. It continued down to 2022 when they recognized that this is end of it. But in the meantime, it was almost 50 years, more than 40, that nuclear energy, as a consequence, became a part of the industry where no significant research, no significant progress was financed. So now we complain about the lack of nuclear energy, we complain about the lack of high-tech solutions there in this area of energy policies, but the fact is that we are basically driving a car that comes technologically from the 1980s, which is nonsense because we forgot to finance this part of the economy in the last 45 years or so. So it was a huge success for the Russia and the Soviet Union, because now the prices we talk about compared to United States is the result. And we have no time to come up with new technical solutions.
We've become dependent on Russian gas. But the problem number one.
We became enslaved, so to say.
Enslaved, I would say, yeah. And Russians was very successful with their policy. And
total success.
This is the first problem. The second problem is that the Green Deal policy originally was actually built on the dependence on Russian gas, because the gas and Russian gas was the key energy for transition to decarbonize economy. That's the problem. That's the problem.
It were the European pirates,
yes,
who pushed this agenda,
and
the Greens.
And
now we have the results. They are becoming so unpopular because
yes, they are. But after the start of, let's say, second Ukraine-Russian war, there was, let's say, the moment of clearness that this is the problem. The Russian gas, the prices of Russian gas are going sky high, but we have to switch the energy or our fuel for this let's say transition to decarbonize economy, and it lasts 2 years. I think it's 2 years, and now what we have? Now we are again at the problem number 2. Because the Green Deal policy is still dependent on the gas, which is partly Russian, let's say from 60 or 70%, because we became dependent on the LNG gas. And it's pretty difficult to say the country of origin of the gas. And sometimes it's Russia. And
we need new technologies, that's for sure. We need to invest into nuclear energy. And very funny, my personal memory is that, and you saw it, 2 years before the Ukrainian war, we mounted one of our public exhibitions, this time dedicated to energy aspects and civilizations. And there are several panels talking about the letter of Sakharov and the situation, and everybody was mocking us, saying, This is not going to happen. We have such a cheap gas from Russia. They need the money, we need the gas. Everybody is happy. That's our major partner. And then what happened? Overnight, February 2022, and everybody realized, oh, damn it.
They've
we,
invaded
we,
Ukraine.
we import gas from the Russia. And so that's one my personal memory. And the second thing is that we really need to invest into new technologies and into, if we want or not, it's a geopolitics. We need, at least for the next 3, 4, 5 decades, nuclear energy. We can't do away without it.
Actually, it's written in the IPCC report.
And the last point is, since you mentioned that we were building our vision of the Green Deal on cheap Russian gas, there is one point to add, namely that the green plan and decarbonization were also based on about 26 or 27 raw sources coming from Ukraine before the war broke up. And now we can't get those. So the Green Deal has obviously, and it's not a specific thing, it happened because due to some geopolitical events, obvious events, that we don't have cheap Russian gas and we don't have raw resources from the Ukraine. And I'm afraid that this situation might still last for several months, if not 1 or 2 years. And then the last point is that I think even if the war will be soon over, major parts of Ukraine are going to be controlled by companies out of the EU, and we will be in a similar situation despite the war or peace.
Yes. So we don't have a gas now.
We don't have gas. We don't have energy. We don't have vision.
And still,
we don't have free market. We don't have exchange. And we don't have leadership
and money. We don't have money because almost all the countries, not every country, but almost all the countries are pretty indebted. Like the debt isn't sustainable for them. Well, and there is one player which doesn't have debt. It's the European Union. And I see in the Draghi report the clear conclusion. We want to raise a debt in the European Union as a whole. And it will be really complicated to agree on that between 27 states, member states.
Because all have to guarantee the debt.
Yes, all have to guarantee the debt. And actually in the Czech Republic, it's almost impossible because we are not that indebted like other states. And who will vote for this policy? No one. It's clear. So what will happen?
I tell you what will happen. We are already at the beginning of being a skansen, and I think that if nothing really reasonable comes, it will go on like this. On the other hand, as you said, the EU as such has no debt. So we could be, as a European Union, as a small island full of history, be a good investment opportunity for the United States, like Alaska some time ago. And maybe we will become more closely associated with the United States. But here I'm joking. But what I want to say...
Oh, it would be perfect.
That would be perfect. I wouldn't mind.
I would be happy.
No, the point, I think, despite all these odds, I think there is a way into the future. There is always a way. The only thing is how much it's gonna cost. That's the only thing. Because sooner or later there will be political high-tech leadership. I'm sure about it, because we have brains, we have people seeing future before all others. So we have the potential. We just have to find the way how to finance them and how to make them working freely all over Europe. Our current challenges are very low profile. We have Schengen. Formally, we have Schengen. but we are not able to sustain it because as soon as COVID
there is no Schengen anymore.
arrived to Europe, all borders shut down without any prior agreements. That's one thing. Everybody was doing it on its own will. Germany, Austria, you name it, France, Italy, Spain, Greece, etc., Czech Republic, obviously. And now it comes again because the Germans have such troubles linked with immigration, started by the former Chancellor Angela Merkel, that now they blame Europe, saying we can't afford to have such immigration anymore. We have to not shut down. We have to control our border, and they are not asking. It hasn't been agreed by the EU, despite the Schengen. So, and I experienced this already several times on the way to Germany. If you arrive in late enough, it means after 8 a.m. to the border, 8 a.m., and it's 1 hour at least from Prague, then you are stuck in a queue because there is no Schengen. They are checking you. Well, the check-in is formal, but still there is border. So what are we talking about? We have, far-reaching plans and visions, but we are not able to operate on what has been already agreed and signed. That's the problem. And we want to, to have future like in the United States, that is, their economy is now, after 20 years of our laying back, the double of our performance. This is a disaster. And it's a scandalous thing, actually, because if you were running a private company that would lose 50% of economic delivery, you would be fired immediately. And the EU bureaucrats are still sitting there and saying, now we know we have those 400 pages and we will do much better. Just trust us again. And that's wrong. That's, I think, completely wrong. I'm sorry to say it as a common citizen.
I have one objection to Draghi report. One more objection. He's saying that we have to invest 800 billion euros a year. So we've invested so much money in the last years to the Green Deal policies that we should be like the mightiest country or the region in the world. It never happened.
We have to borrow the money.
This is the problem. We have to invest. Investment normally comes with the profit. But we've invested so much money and there is no profit. That's the problem. Yeah. That's the problem.
And without European exchange, there will be no significant profit. That's one thing. And the second thing is, again, political. That the period of political instability is approaching as well. We just passed the third polls in Germany. This time it was in Brandenburg.
Yes,
and again, AfD almost 30%. 1/3 of the voices was won by the right-wing political party, not talking about the left-wing Communist Party that won 19%, am I right? Not 12 or 19. And so if you put them all together, it's more than 45%, almost 50% of voices are extreme left or right, that are anti-immigrant, that are anti EU expansion, etc. So I would say our future is still open, and I still hope, because we all have kids, we don't want to live in Hawaii till the end of our times. So it's just a question how long and how expensive it will be.
Yes, and it will be long and very expensive.
I think that's the best way how to conclude our talk today.
Thank you for being with us, and hello, goodbye.
Take care and have a good day.